In this video, we're talking about 7 critical story brand mistakes. You need to watch this before you lock in your brand script. What up, nerds? Welcome back to the Brand Nerd Podcast. I'm Mitch Metter, a 6-year story brand certified guide and the top nerd at Brand Nerd. Today, we're geeking out over StoryBrand once again. Because I've been doing this for 6 years, I have my 10,000 hours, and there are mistakes that I've seen people make over and over again that I want to just put out there so that if you're working on your StoryBrand framework, on your brand script, you can avoid these common pitfalls. I also want to put in a plug for episode 3, where we talked about the biggest story brand mistake people make. That will not be covered in this episode, but if you go to episode 3, you can find out about that. Quickly, to review the story brand framework, it's 7 parts, and this video is 7 mistakes. That's not a coincidence. We're going to pick one mistake per part, the biggest mistake for each part, in my opinion. So the story brand framework is 7 parts. It's a hero with a problem who meets a guide, who hands them a plan and calls them to action that results in success or failure. So those are the 7 steps, and as we go through each one, I'll elaborate a little bit more and talk about the mistakes that often happen with each of these elements. So let's start with number 1, a hero. This is your customer. What we're trying to understand is, what do they want? And the biggest mistake people make here is they just overcomplicate what their hero wants. I think the best way to explain these mistakes is just to give you examples. So if you're looking for a real estate agent to sell your home, what you want is to sell your home. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. Yes, you want to sell it for the most value. Yes, you want to sell it with somebody who you like, but ultimately, you just want to sell your home. And similarly, if you're looking for a tax professional, you just want your taxes done right. You're not necessarily looking for a friend. You're not looking for the closest to your house, although maybe those things are true. At the end of the day, what you're looking for is your taxes to be done right. So when you're asking yourself, what does my character want? You want to put that in its simplest terms. Let's move on to the second part of the StoryBrand framework, which is the problem. And if you've been around StoryBrand, you know that we believe in talking about our customers' problems. It builds empathy. It helps them understand that you understand them. And it also goes back to the fundamental principle here, which is that they are the hero in the story and not you. So when you talk about their problems, they go, yes, that's me. They understand that this story is about them. So what is keeping them from getting what they want? Part 1, we established what they want. In part 2, with the problem, we identify the things keeping them from getting what they want. And even deeper than that, how that makes them feel and what is just philosophically wrong with that. And the big mistake you see here is companies have a hard time putting themselves in their customers' shoes. And the problems that they come up with tend to be the problems that they see and not necessarily the problems that the customer sees. So it's very important to think about it in terms of what they want. And the example I want to use here is, let's say this is a nonprofit, and the nonprofit addresses world hunger. It would be really easy for them to talk about the problem being how hard it is to feed people in third world countries. That would be really easy, and people would relate to that. They go, oh, that's probably very, very tough. But the reality is, the problem you want to talk about is that there's not enough good people like you, my character, who are stepping in to help us solve this problem. You want to put them as the hero. Essentially, hungry people are waiting for you to step up. That's the problem. In summary, you want to make sure that the problem is the problem that your customer sees. When you're a nonprofit, you have people, they're looking for something to donate to, looking for somewhere to put their money to work in a way that makes them feel good. So make sure that you are identifying a problem that is actually for them and not for you. Let's move on to section 3, which is the guide. A guide is empathetic and authoritative. It's somebody who's knows your problems, but also who's been there before and knows how to solve those problems. And a big mistake that people make here is they just list accomplishments and they just talk about their customers' problems, which are good, but this is your opportunity to actually tell your story. This is your opportunity to, think of it as the origin story. Just like a hero has an origin story, the guide can have an origin story. Let's say you're a landscape designer. What made you become that? Were you working for a big company and realized, man, there's got to be a better way, or I can do this on my own? Or maybe you went to college and you got like a fancy landscape architect degree and decided to go right out and start your own company. You're a go-getter. Or maybe you did your own yard, you designed it, and you love doing it, and neighbors started asking you to do theirs and friends, and all of a sudden you created a business without even trying it. These origin stories demonstrate the empathy and authority in a way that draws people in. Don't just list your accomplishments. Don't just give customer testimonials. Don't just show your certifications and awards. Do those things, but do it in combination with telling your story. Moving on to section 4. Our guide gives the customer, the hero, a plan. And the idea here is that you want to show them how easy it is to work with you. You want to show them step by step. This is easy. You just do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. Now, the problem that comes up over and over again is we want to stuff as many steps in there as we can. You want to keep it simple. Now, how do you do that? Because the process from, the first interaction with the client all the way to painting a picture of success, that could be a lot of steps. Well, you want to boil it down to its fundamental elements. And one way that's helpful to think about this is there's actually 2 distinct plans that you can choose from. One plan is what you might consider the pre-purchase plan. This is what leads up to your decision. The other would be a post-purchase plan. Like, this is what happens once you've made the decision to work with me. This is how easy it is. So just let's think of it from the lens of a consultant. You have 2 options. You have pre-purchase, how do you work with me? Or post-purchase, which is like, here's what happens. And I like to call this the secret sauce. And the reason I chose a consultant is because I think consultants are one of the best options for the post-purchase plan. If you're a plumber, you don't want to do the post-purchase. People aren't as concerned about your process. They want to know more about how do they work with you? How easy is it to get you out to my house? Consultants, it's much more like, well, what are you going to do for me if I hire you? So that post-purchase plans make sense. So let's look at a pre-purchase plan for a consultant. It might be something like book a call, and then we'll do our first consulting session for free. And then, you choose to work with me and we grow your business. That can be boop, 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 1, 2, 3. Or post-purchase plan could be something like, I show you my, 16-step system. We have weekly check-ins to go over each step. And as you implement them, you're going to start to see massive success in your business. So 1, 2, 3, follow the system, weekly check-in, massive success. When we try to stuff too many things into our plan, it does the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it super simple, and instead we end up making it super complicated. Number 5, the call to action. We have to tell people what to do or they won't do it. If you're thinking in terms of like a website, the call to action is the big colorful button that you want everybody to click. And the problem that people make, the mistake that people make with this is they get too vague. Your call to action should use action words like get, buy, schedule, call, and things like that. The most frustrating thing is when all roads lead to a contact us on a website. I'm sure you've been there. Let's say it's a manufacturing company and they've got dealers across the region or across the country, and it doesn't matter if you click on find a dealer, it doesn't matter. And if you click on become a dealer, no matter what, it's just contact us, which is weak. It's almost as weak as learn more, right? We want to have a button that says find a dealer. When you click on that, you can find a dealer. And when you click on a button that says become a dealer, it's not a contact us form. It's a form that is clearly like an application to becoming a dealer, where you can confidently send off your information to be reviewed as to whether or not you would pre-qualify to be a dealer. So when we call people to action, we have to be direct. We don't want to be vague. We want to be direct. We want to call them and make it super clear that this is the button you click on. This is what I need you to do next if you want to do business with me. Now we get to the part of the story where it either results in success or failure. These are steps 6 and 7. And when we talk about success, this is the happy ending. This is happily ever after. We want to paint a picture of what our hero's life will look like at the end of this journey. And the biggest mistake people make is they lose sight of the transformation. Remember, your heroes started in one place. They had wants, they had needs, they had problems. And now we are taking them through this journey to the other side where they've reached success. Don't you think that should be a complete story? That those two things should tie together? However, this is something that people just miss all the time. If your customer wants a bathroom remodel and they're overwhelmed at the options, there's, do I hire like a handyman? Do I hire like a big interior design firm? There's so many options. What do I do? I just feel like I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed out, and at the end of the day, I just need somebody to remodel the bathroom on budget, on time, and make it look like something out of the magazine. You need to connect the beginning of that story, where they're in that stressed out place, to the end and talk about how at the end they are stress-free and excited to live in their home, that working with you has been just this joyful experience and decisions were easy because you presented them in a way that they understood the ramifications of each decision and how that affected the budget and the timeline. When we paint this picture of success, we need to tie it back to the original starting point. This is a transformation from A to B, and we need to connect that beginning to the end. So every story can result in success, or it can result in failure, and that's number 7. Failure is the cost of not doing business with you. Because if there's not a cost to not doing business with you, then what is the point of doing business with you? And honestly, the mistake here is people just don't include it. They don't do it, and this is a huge mistake. Now, it's easy if you're in IT security or pest control, right? These are businesses, services designed to help you avoid failure. So people naturally, when marketing these, when messaging these, will talk about failure. But what about something like, an independent insurance agent, right? Now, we see the big guys, we see their commercials. They do a pretty good job of understanding failure, mayhem, and those types of things. But sometimes, like a smaller company, they just want to be your buddy, right? They want to save you money, and we're nice people. But what about disaster? Are you covered? Will somebody answer the call when I pick up? Paint a picture of what it would be like if you weren't working with them. If you are working with the big company and you're calling a hotline and maybe you get somebody who cares, maybe you don't, maybe it's, after business hours. Paint the picture of what the cost of not doing business with you is. This is the salt in the recipe, okay? So salt, a little bit goes a long way, but if it's missing, it's bland. So your message without failure becomes bland. It doesn't hit as hard as it could. So there you have it. 7 critical StoryBrand mistakes. What did you learn? I would love to hear your questions or comments on YouTube in the comment section. If you're watching it here, just press the like button, leave a comment. That helps other people find this video as well. I just want to take a second to say that StoryBrand is incredibly simple, but that doesn't make it easy. I've been doing this a long time, 6 years, and I've helped hundreds of people go through this process. And what I've realized is that it's really hard to take a look at your own business for yourself, especially when you're doing a new framework that you've just learned. If you go to storybrandsprint.com, you could book a session with me, and instead of taking weeks of painful work and still wondering if you got it right, you could have your message practically overnight. storybrandsprint.com. It's the fastest way to get your StoryBrand message and know you've got it right. Thank you so much for listening to the Brand Nerd Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this short episode. I'll see you next week, and until then, stay curious.